Hi guys, and welcome to the next new series on the database exam for 2021. And in this video we're going to be looking through the scenario, and we're going to be looking at how we can normalize our data into the tables that we need to create. So let's have a look at our scenario that we'll be given in the exam paper itself. We need to make sure that we understand what's being asked for. So in task 1 or activity 1, we're looking at how we can create a relationship in our tables. What we need to do is try and eradicate and reduce any opportunities for duplication of data in our database. And by doing normalization, we should be able to work out what fields we don't need to have copies of, or how we can minimize certain things. We need to make sure that we use certain naming conventions. Now in your exam, you need to make sure that you're being very careful about how you name your tables. These are easy points that you can lose and actually gain. So make sure that when you're saving your tables, you use the prefix of TBL before the name that you're going to choose. You need to make sure that you've got data integrity, and that also when you create relationships that you use the right links between the tables, such as one-to-manys, manys-to-manys, and ones-to-ones, making sure that you're using them appropriately in the right place. So let's move on and look at how we can normalize our data set. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at where our primary keys are. As you can see, we've got 4 primary keys: exhibition ID, artist ID, gallery ID, and gallery type ID. These quite clearly define to us these 4 tables. As you can see from the image I've got on the screen, I've now given the tables the headings and the names. So TBL exhibition, TBL artist, TBL gallery, and TBL gallery type. Now we need to move all of the fields that are inside of the table into the required tables that have been created. As you can see here, we've moved the gallery into the table gallery. We've moved the gallery type into the gallery type table, the artist surname and the artist initial into the artist table, and finally into the exhibition table we've added the number of days, the exhibition start date, and the predicted sales. We're now going to move on to the foreign keys. Foreign keys are primary keys taken from another table. As you can see from the diagram, we're moving some of the primary keys from gallery, gallery type, and artist into different tables so that we can establish our one-to-many relationships. We're now going to move into the creation of this database. Now that we've got our normalized plan with our relationships and the links between the tables, we need to create our database. So first of all, you're going to need to open up Access. Once you've opened up Access, you're going to need to choose to create a blank database. Once you've done this, you'll notice you're given a dialog box where you need to locate or identify where you'd like to save your database. In your exam, you're going to need to use your recorded areas or your controlled assessment areas to do this. But in this example of coursework, you're going to need to find somewhere that's safe for you to remember to go to. Then you're going to need to make sure that you're giving your database an appropriate name. In this example, I'm giving it Part A Exam. Notice when you open up your database for the first time, you're going to be put into a different view. What you need to do is change this view into Design View so that we can start creating our tables. You'll be prompted to give your table a name. Make sure you give the table name the same name as what you identified inside of your normalized diagram. Here you can see I'm calling it TBL Artist. Once you've done so, you'll be now moved into the design view of your table. As we saw in our relationship diagram, we have a series of IDs, and these are unique identifiers. So we're going to choose Artist ID as the first one, and we're going to make sure that we're going to give it a number. I'll come back to why we're giving it the data type of number rather than auto number later. Then we're going to choose to give a surname for the artist. Obviously we're going to choose short text here, and then we're going to give the artist initial, which is also going to be short text. Don't forget, as you can see from the little dialog box that's popped up on the screen, we need to identify what field sizes we're going to be using. Remember, we've been asked to give the artist's initial as one initial, so we need to change our field size. If you don't change your field sizes in your exam paper, you're going to lose marks, so make sure you change everyone as best you can, making sure that it's appropriate for the data that's going in. Now click on the X on the Table tab and click Yes to save. Now we're going to move on to the next table. And the next table that we're going to create is going to look at the area of gallery. Again, like we did before, we're going to use gallery ID, and the data type is going to be number, and we need to make sure that we're establishing that as a primary key, so that makes it a unique identifier. Then we move on to giving the next area of the field, which is gallery name. Again, we're going to choose short text here and make sure that when we come to the properties window that we change that to an appropriate value in field length. Next, we're going to add another field name for gallery type ID. Now, this is the first of our foreign keys that we need to include within our tables. So obviously our data type has to reflect this. So we need to choose number as our data type for this table and for this field name. Next, we're going to be moving the data types we've chosen. We need to just close the table and make sure that we saved it as table gallery. Now we're going to move on to creating our third table. This table is going to be linked to our gallery table, and it's going to be where we're going to put the information as to the gallery type. So here we're going to have our first field name of being gallery underscore type underscore ID. This allows us to obviously create our primary key. So the data type needs to be a number, and we need to identify it in a second, as we will do, as a primary key. Then we're going to add our data type, and in this one we're going to use the lookup wizard. We're going to use the lookup wizard to allow us to create the two entries that we want to add to our database. So to achieve this, choose the lookup wizard in the data types area, and we're going to type in the values that we want inside of our lookup wizard. So select that option, click next, and then we should be provided with a dialog box that allows us to enter our two values. Click inside the column 1 and add our values, first one being commercial and the second being combo. Click next and then click finish. Finally, we need to make sure that our primary key is selected. So select the gallery underscore type underscore ID section, and then from the toolbar choose the primary key option. This will make our primary key. We're going to save this. So if we click on close, and then it will automatically prompt us to save the table. Let's make sure that we use our naming conventions as we outlined in our relationships diagram earlier on. We're going to call this table TBL gallery type, and then we're going to close. So now we have 3 of our 4 tables. So let's create a final table, and that final table is going to be the information about the exhibition. So what we're going to do is we're going to add our first field name of exhibition underscore ID. And we're going to choose in this instance to create this as a auto number. Now the reason I'm choosing auto number in this instance, if we look at our data set, all of the numbers for the exhibition IDs are sequential. They go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are no omissions of any IDs in that data set. If we look closely, as we suggested earlier on, at some of the artist or some of the gallery information, there are omitted keys, i.e. it goes 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and so on. There are omitted ones, but that's why we choose number, because obviously we won't be able to omit those when we go into the creation of our database. So here you can see we can add the number of days. Our data type is going to be number, and then we move on to creating the next field name, which is going to be the exhibition underscore start underscore date. Here we're going to choose the data type of date and time, and we're going to need to make sure that we choose the correct format for this. So we're going to use the short date option so that it's in line with what the data set says in our exam papers. Next, we're going to move on to the predicted underscore sales field name. This is going to be dealing with currency, so we need to make sure we're choosing currency. Automatically, it's going to set the number of decimal places because we've chosen currency. Now we're going to start to add in our foreign keys from our other tables that we've created. The first of which is going to be the gallery underscore ID. This is important to us because we want to know what gallery the exhibition is appearing in, and we need to make sure that the data type for this is number so that our data types match. And then we're going to move on to the artist underscore ID. And again, this needs to be number because it's a number inside of the other table. And these are our foreign keys that we need to create. to click on View, which will prompt us to save this table. And we're going to need to make sure that when we save the table, that we save it as TBL Exhibition. Now, if you notice, as soon as I click OK here, we're prompted to make sure that we've defined a primary key. So if we select No here, or Cancel, and then go back up to our primary key area, which is going to be Exhibition ID, select it, choose the primary key option, and then click Save. And what should happen is, because our name's already typed in, it should be there, and click OK. And now we have our fourth and final table. However, we're going to stay in this table because we're going to add some new information. We're going to go and select the number of days. Inside of our exam paper, there are a few pieces of details that we need to make sure that we've read and understand. The first is that we must make sure that the number of days is only between 3 and 10. So all we need to do here is click on the validation rule and add between 3 and 10. And we're going to put some validation text in here that says, please enter the duration of the exhibition between 3 and 10 days. The next one we're going to look at moving to is the artist ID. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go and create a combo box. This combo box is going to pull information from the table and it's going to bind it to a specific column. So let's choose the table we want, so table artist or TBL artist, and we're going to choose to bind it to the column 1, which is our primary key, and then we're going to show column count of number 3. What this should do is should show us all 3 columns inside of that table, but only bind the value of the primary key in column 1 to the cell inside of our foreign key. We're now going to do the same for gallery. We're going to choose the row source of gallery, and we're going to choose the ID as the bound column as number 1, and we're going to show 2 columns. We just need to see the ID and the gallery name. The next step for us inside of our database creation is just to open up the tables that we've created and just make sure that the validation rules or the data type selections that we've created or assigned to our fields are correct. So we're just going to go through and add some of our data. Now it's always important to check that the data or the input masks that we've created works. So as you can see from this example here, I'm just quite quickly going into the surname or into the initials, and I'm just going to place in some of the data out of our database exam paper. As you can see, we're going to attach artist ID number 1, and then we're going to choose the name of the surname of the artist. And you can see here that our input mask that we assigned earlier on to capitalize the first letter is doing so for us. So Andreasen has a capital A, and when we put in a lowercase q for the artist's initial, it does so as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to start to fill in these tables, and you need to do this obviously inside of your exams. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fast forward on this point so that you can enter in your data yourselves and get to a point where you've got all of the data inside of your tables. So now that we've got all of the data inside of our tables, as is in the data set that's provided to us by the exam board, we're going to need to make sure that these tables talk to each other. So to do this, we're going to click on the database tools. We're going to select relationships, and then we're going to choose the button to add tables. Once we've added the tables element, you'll see that on the right hand side we have a list of the tables that we want to choose. Let's select all 4 of our tables that we've got, and you'll see that the tables correspond to the ones that we've got open. Now it's important to make sure that if you've got any of the tables open when you're trying to create relationships in this relationships tab, that they're all closed. Otherwise you won't be able to establish your links. So as you can see here, we're going to add the artist ID into the exhibition ID by simply selecting it and dragging it. Now once you've done that, you'll notice that when you drag it over, the dialog box pops up with the query or table type and the related query and table type. You have a few options as well that are to enforce the referential integrity, and you have the cascade update and cascade delete, and you'll notice the relationship type says one-to-many. So you're going to need to make sure that these links are one-to-many links between each of the tables. So next we're going to move on to gallery, and we're going to click on the gallery type ID, And we click on the gallery ID, drag that over to the gallery ID in the exhibition area, and we're going to do the same as what we did with the artist, making sure that we've enforced referential integrity, updated and deleted records, and just make sure that the one-to-many relationship is there. Finally, we're going to move on to the gallery type ID, and we're going to drag this into our gallery table so that the link between the two tables is established. And as with the other two tables, we're going to make sure that we have our referential integrity selected and the update and delete cascade options are selected also. Now you can see that when we open up the four tables that we've created, because we've established the links between the tables, you'll now be able to see that there is a plus sign beside certain entries inside of certain tables. This relates to the establishment of the relationships between the tables and how each piece of data will correspond to a primary key or a foreign key in another table. So as you can see here, as I expand the plus signs, you'll see the attached data for specific entries inside of our databases. For example, commercial has 5 entries, and inside each of those entries we can see each exhibition that has been running for that entry.